All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. My name is Chris Berry, of course, and we do these weekly webinars once a week, every Wednesday at 1 o'clock, where we just log in and answer whatever questions you have. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put it into the Q&A section, and I'll make sure to address it. Otherwise, we have 3 questions that were submitted ahead of time. So I'll dig into those. But first, I would start with a positive focus, something positive that happened recently. And so my positive focus is that I was able to spend last weekend up in Mackinac City with my wife and kids. So we went to Mackinac City, spent a day on the island, did the carriage tour around Mackinac Island, and we were able to get out of there before, I don't know if you saw, there was a bomb threat on Mackinac Bridge. So luckily we were out of there by the time that happened. But it was a great time up north. So that's my positive focus. So again, if you do have a question or you want something answered from a legal, financial, or tax standpoint, please put it in the question answer or the chat. Otherwise, what I'll do is share my screen and get into some of the questions already submitted. And if you do have a question or something's unclear as I'm going over this, feel free to put that in the Q&A. So again, this is for you. There's no scheduled PowerPoint or anything like that. It's really just answering people's questions. So with that, let me share my screen. And if you want to see how something specifically that we cover applies to your situation, go to 15chris.com and you can book some time on the calendar. Otherwise, let's get into the questions. So first question, what is the difference between a living will and a will? So what we're talking about here are what we call estate planning tools. And typically, when we're talking about estate planning, the tools we typically use are a trust, and there's different types of trusts. A lot of times we'll have a will, we'll have a financial power of attorney, so you get a knock on your head, who's going to make financial decisions, a medical power of attorney, who's going to make medical decisions, and then if you own real estate, some type of deed, typically like a ladybird deed, which is a type of deed that says the home is in your name while alive, and then upon death flows into the trust. And then we always need to make sure that if we do have a trust, we work on getting it funded properly, making sure assets are titled in the name of the trust. So a will, sometimes like the technical term is a last will and testament. Okay. Now, important thing about a will is that it just gives instructions to the probate court. And if you're looking at avoiding probate, you don't want to rely on a will. Typically, that's why most people end up doing a trust, because a will gives instructions to the probate court versus a trust, which avoids probate. So the question is, what is a living will? Well, a living will is really, it's talking about end-of-life decision-making. And many states have a statute saying what a living will is. Michigan is one of the few states that doesn't have a statute on living will. So really, this type of end-of-life decision-making, it falls into the medical power of attorney. Now, this might have different names. We might call it a patient advocate designation. That's the technical name, advocate designation. That's the technical name in Michigan, as we call it, a patient advocate designation. You might also hear this called an advance directive. Healthcare proxy. All of these basically mean the same thing. All of them are referring to a medical power of attorney. And then I'll even throw living will in there. So living will is end-of-life decision-making. You might have heard of Terri Schiavo. She was a woman down in Florida. She was in a vegetative state. Her husband wanted to remove her from life support. Her family wanted her to remain on life support. It became a big court battle that lasted over 8 years. That's all because she did not have a living will or a medical power of attorney or patient advocate or advanced directive, appointing our spouse to be able to make these medical decisions. So really all of these kind of are the same thing. Big picture, a living will, it's confusing. A living will talks about end of life decision making, while your will is your instructions to the probate court. So really any comprehensive estate plan at the end of the day will have a trust, typically a will, financial power of attorney, medical power of attorney, deed, and then if we have a trust, we need to make sure everything's funded. So your living will, that's kind of part of your medical power of attorney. So hopefully that was helpful. All right, number 2. I am 65. The person that writes this question is 67. I mean, I'm not 67. My wife is 65. Should I take Social Security now or wait until age 70? Well, as an attorney and fiduciary, I have to give this answer the it depends treatment. It depends on your situation. And again, that's where we first figure out what are your goals, figure out the best strategy, and then pick tools to help you achieve those strategies. Now, that said, there's 2 ways to look at Social Security timing, and that's really what we're getting into it. So just looking at Social Security timing, kind of in the vacuum of how to maximize the most out of Social Security. So a lot of times when I talk to people, that's really what they're looking at it is they're just, how do I get the most out of Social Security as possible? And some people kind of default to taking it as soon as possible because they want to get as much as possible from Social Security. Other people default to taking it at full retirement age or taking it later because Social Security grows at roughly about 8% per year in terms of your income. But really what happens is there's a couple key ages. So 62 is typically the earliest you can take Social Security. Your full retirement age might be at 66 or 67, depending on when you're born. And then the latest you would want to take Social Security is age 70. So this is what we call full retirement age. And a lot of times we don't take Social Security during this time period. Most people take it either at full retirement age or age 70, because what happens is each year you wait, your Social Security benefit grows roughly 8% a year. And you can't really get 8% a year guaranteed in the market. So the idea of creating an income stream that's 8% greater if we wait longer, that might be appealing, especially if we think we're going to live longer. So why might we want to delay taking Social Security? So why take Social Security at age 70? Well, if we think we're going to live for a long time, so longevity, okay? Because what happens is there's kind of a break-even point. So if we say we take Social Security at 62, then your benefits are kind of going like this, versus if you take Social Security at 70, okay, you're missing out on benefits, but there's going to be kind of a crossover point, a break-even point, usually about 82 to 84 is when that break-even point is. So if you plan on living past, say, 82, then just from a number standpoint, it's probably going to make sense to delay taking Social Security. Second, if you have a spouse, understand the spouse will get bumped up to the higher Social Security. So if we have one spouse who's, say, Social Security for one spouse is $3,000 per month, and then the non-working spouse's Social Security was only $1,000 per month, we're not only looking at your longevity, but also we need to take into account the longevity of spouse. So if you were to pass away, they would get bumped up to your higher Social Security. So if we delay taking Social Security, that might not just benefit you, but that might also benefit that surviving spouse. Third reason why a lot of times we lean towards taking Social Security later is I call this the worst case scenario. So what is the worst case scenario if you wait to take Social Security at 70? A lot of times people will say, well, what happens if I die at 71, right? Well, then you passed away. And sure, you didn't maximize the amount from Social Security, but you're dead and it doesn't really matter. Versus if you take Social Security at 62, and now you have a reduced benefit of, say, only 1,500 versus if you're to wait and it's $3,000 and you live forever and then you run out of money or your expenses outpace your income, I think that's a worse scenario. So I'm not saying everyone should delay taking Social Security, but just those are some reasons why you might want to delay taking Social Security. Now, on the other hand, if we take Social Security earlier and allows you to retire early and you can enjoy some of those go-go years more and do more, then maybe that's the reason to take Social Security earlier. But I don't look at Social Security just in a vacuum. We need to look at it in terms of an overall plan, right? And this is really what we focus on, is having an income plan, an investment plan. This is all part of what we call a retirement and legacy blueprint, a tax plan. So how are you going to navigate taxes, healthcare, and then legacy? So fitting Social Security not just into an income plan, but also really this factors into tax planning as well. And I'll show you why. So, and we've talked about this many times, we have these different taxable buckets. We have post-tax. So this is money that you have to pay tax on the gains. We have pre-tax. These are like your IRAs and 401ks. And then we have tax-free. So how does Social Security fit into this conversation? Well, let's say you retire at age 62. Okay, what happens to your wages? So your wages go down, meaning your income goes down. And if we delay taking Social Security, then if we're looking at tax brackets, we might now drop to like have zero tax. And then there's 10, and then 22, and then 24, right? So what this allows us to do is when we retire, now we can pull money out of here for one reason being income. So now that we're at lower tax brackets, we pull money from the IRAs to cover our income need. And then also, if there's space, so let's say our income need gets us to $100,000 of income, well, there's space to do things like Roth conversions or move the money to cash value life insurance. So by the time we reach 72, when now RMDs happen, or 70, so then at 70, we turn on Social Security because we've lowered the amount in our tax deferred bucket. And now by the time we reach 72, our required minimum distributions might be minimal. So another reason why we might want to delay taking Social Security is for tax planning reasons, because it allows us to get more money out of those pre-tax accounts without Social Security factoring into the analysis or factoring into additional income. So if we turn on Social Security too early, that limits the amount we can pull money out of the retirement accounts in the most tax efficient manner possible. So, but that said, there's no hardline rule. Whenever we're sitting down with clients, we're going over all the different options. So hopefully that's helpful. All right, let me see if there's any questions or comments. None so far. And again, if you do have a question or something's unclear, please just let me know. All right, number 3, there's been talk of inflation. What steps should we be taking to protect against it? Again, it depends on your situation. But one big thing would be don't lock up money in strictly fixed accounts. Okay. So what am I talking about here? I'm not talking about fixed index accounts, but I'm talking about fixed accounts. So things I'd be staying away from right now would be CDs offered by banks, multi-year guaranteed annuities, which are the same thing as CDs. Both of these are going to have a fixed rate of return. Like a CD for 6 months might be 1%. Multi-year guaranteed annuity for a couple of years might be 2%. You're basically locking yourself into those types of accounts. Also, don't have too much what I call lazy money. So money just sitting in savings. Like typically all you should have is really an emergency funds, or you should have whatever your emergency fund is. So maybe 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. And then if you're in retirement, whatever your income gap is for the year, and then whatever big expenses you have coming up for the year. Otherwise, that you're actually losing that money due to inflation. Because having money sitting in your checking, savings, or money market, you're lucky if you get 1%. And I think the latest I saw for Social Security increase, I think this year is going to be like 5%, if I'm not mistaken. So things that we want to avoid, CDs probably aren't the best route to go. Multi-year guaranteed annuities, leaving excess money in things like checking, savings, money market. So then the question is, okay, what do we do with that money? Well, that's where kind of we have this conversation where any investment has 2 out of 3 characteristics. We can have our money geared towards growth. We can have it geared towards liquidity, or we can have it geared towards safety. And any investment has only 2 out of those 3 characteristics. So money that's safe and liquid, this is the money at the bank. And again, this is that lazy money where if inflation is going up, the cost of goods are going up, and you have money that's not earning any interest, then that value of that cash is going down. Like I had a client I was meeting with today, and their wife passed away, but her idea of safety was putting money into the mattress. Like, well, if inflation's going up, the value of that dollar is going down. So we don't necessarily want to rely on that. So we want to look at something that offers some growth. So this might be putting the money into the market, and we can have aggressive or conservative portfolios, or you might want to look at certain investment tools that have the opportunity for growth or safety. And this might be things like fixed index annuities or cash value life insurance, where the downside is protected, but you can get a rate of return of anywhere 5 to 8%, which again would be outpacing inflation these days. So so with the talk of inflation, first thing is don't lock up money into kind of fixed accounts like CDs or multi-year guaranteed annuities, where you're locked into getting basically a crummy interest rate. Because if you look at interest rates right now, mortgage rates are super low. I just had a client refinance for about 2.5%. Well, unfortunately, that's also affecting the interest rate you earn on CDs, multi-year guaranteed annuities, and even bonds, right? I have a lot of people who, so the money in the market typically is made up of what? Equities, like stock and bonds. And with bonds performing so bad, they're moving their safe money over here, just because bonds are offering such a horrible rate of return right now. So don't lock up money in fixed accounts. And I would also, and the second thing would be don't have excess lazy money sitting at the bank. Really, the money at the bank should be geared typically towards whatever your emergency fund is, which again is about 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. Any big expenses you have for the year. So if there's a big home improvement deal or something like that, that money should be safe and liquid. And then if you are in retirement, whatever your income gap is for the year. So if you know that you need about an extra $1,000 a month over and above whatever your fixed income is, then maybe you should have $12,000 sitting in checking savings. So with inflation, what's the big thing is just make sure that your money is working for you. Don't have excess money sitting at the bank. Don't lock your money up into things that are offering you basically horrible interest rates for a period of time. So, all right. That was the 3 questions that I had submitted ahead of time. So if you do have any other questions or anything else you want me to cover, whether it's in the news or you heard this or Susie Orman said this or Dave Ramsey said that, feel free to put that over into the Q&A and I'll go ahead and answer that. And we'll give everyone another minute to put in any questions if they do have any questions. And going once, going twice, and sold. All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for logging in. If you do have questions, feel free to shoot those over via email.